Brad, thank you so much for joining me on the podcast. I'm so looking forward to talking with you.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for having me.
Um, I became aware of you when you started speaking out very bravely and early on against the COVID mandates. Um, and so you started doing that in part through your music. I'm curious to know a little bit about your background and the history there. I mean, have you ever written so-called, I don't know if you refer to it in this way, but I know that others have referred to it as, protest music. Has that
Mhm.
kind of been your thing, or is that a new thing?
No, it wasn't my thing at all, actually, which is what's so funny about it was, I started Five Times August right after high school, and I was 18 years old. And I've always just written about what was going on in my life. So when I was starting out, it was girlfriends and breakup songs. And as I got older, that's what my songs were about growing up. And, um, I actually was I became a dad. I'm a dad of three, and I was doing kids music prior to COVID. I was fully invested in this side project I was doing, which couldn't have been further away from where I ended up a year later. But I was over here doing this like super pure, character building songs for families that were, just fun to do and very playful and whimsical and catchy. And then um, and so I was doing, a pop singer songwriter thing for a very long time. And, just throughout COVID, I started getting a little more vocal online just with my opinions in general, which really kind of, I think it was an escalating thing where it was just like something was welling up inside of me, where it was like, it was is a combination of like, I can't believe this is happening. Why are none of my musical heroes speaking up? I've got to say something for my kids. This world doesn't seem like something I want to leave behind for them. I've got to stand up. So this is this welling up of things that kept happening. And at first, I managed it actually with a short stint writing parody songs at the beginning of COVID. I was when we were doing like the 2 weeks to slow the spread thing, and everybody was kind of like, "What's going on here?" I was letting off steam by writing these sort of ambiguous songs that were poking fun at it, but also not really crossing a line to say this is, absurd and nobody should be believing it. So I was doing that, and then I really started. After that, I was like, okay, this isn't even really funny anymore. Like, I just wasn't like even having fun writing that. And so it kept becoming more and more of a serious issue to me throughout 2020. And so by the time 2021 rolls around, I've got a song that I've written called God Help Us All that was really just a complete vent of just how I was seeing things. And it's a pretty long song. It's like 5 minutes of just me saying, pretty much coming to terms with like, we're in a bad situation and, God help us all. And so I put out that song, and I had 20 years of a music career behind me. And so I upset a lot of people that had been following me for a really long time with some of the lines in that song. Um, Particularly mask up, vax up, get your body trashed up, lines like that they never heard me really say that in my music before. And even though I was getting a little more vocal with my posts online, I hadn't committed it to tape, so to speak. So now I'm saying these things, and it I didn't look at it as protest music. I just looked at it as, this just needs to be said. And instantaneously I started losing fans, and it was simultaneously losing fans and gaining new fans at the same time. People that were saying, I can't believe you said that, I'm never listening to you again. And then on the other side, people saying, thank you for saying that, I just found out about you. And that encouraged me because I was letting off steam in my own way from my own family and from my own perspective as an artist. And so I just continued down that path. And sure enough, I sort of, found myself in this kind of protest era of my career. and that's how I got there. But it was never like, if I wrote a song about the world before, it was very like coming from a nice place. It was like, let's come together, let's all unite, kind of a very positive and optimistic outlook if I was to write a song with a broader scope. But prior to COVID, and then became a very narrow lane for me for a while, where it was like, I'm saying things that not a lot of people agree with, but I am finding the people that do agree with me here. And that really meant a lot to me.
Yeah. So, like, did you kind of catch on right away? I said, like, for myself, I
Mm-hmm.
didn't, and I've talked about this and
Mm-hmm.
written about this a lot of times, but right away I was sort of
Mm-hmm.
like, just 2 weeks, guys, like, stop complaining. You guys are being
Mm-hmm.
such babies. And then I
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
started listening to people who had a different view and, had a number of
Mm-hmm.
people on the podcast who were critical of really the entire narrative from the beginning. And so I learned a lot and changed my mind accordingly.
Mm-hmm.
It didn't
Yeah.
take me too long, but maybe within the first month or so. Did
Mm-hmm.
you like when you heard that first 2 weeks to stop the spread when you first started hearing about this? Were you skeptical right away, or was there something that triggered that?
Yeah, I think I was pretty skeptical the whole time. I already was, kind of down a few different rabbit holes, in the conspiracy world anyway. But
Right.
as far as like, our health and wellness, my wife and I were very deep down that particular rabbit hole, because my oldest son had been injured by his early childhood shot. So as far as the vaccine conversation went, like, we were already way down that rabbit hole. But and my wife's she is she's like a mama bear, a Google mom that's not, that Google mom that's been downplayed, that like, oh, she did her own research. Well, she's been doing that for a really long time, and those moms really know their stuff. And so a lot of this stuff was in our ether. But by the time COVID rolls around, nothing made sense, and it was just sort of like, yeah, I'm going along with it, and I'll crack the jokes of like, wash your hands. I remember saying that in some of the videos, but it was really just out of just to poke fun at it in my own way. But I by the time masks came around, like, which was pretty early on anyway, it was kind of like, no, 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 like, this doesn't make sense. Like, we're
No,
not all
this
supposed to be doing this for sure. There's a little bit of that, like, gauging the situation at hand of like, well, what's going on here? Do I take it seriously? Do I not take it seriously? But because I think that my generation grew up in a time where you don't believe what you see on TV, and you don't necessarily trust the news. So I've always sort of questioned what it is that I'm looking at. But I think if I did follow, I think maybe that first 2 weeks was the best that they got out of me. Was just like, I'll go along with this, but it doesn't make sense. This is kind of getting silly. And then sure enough, after that, because I remember even saying like, this isn't going to stop after 2 weeks. Like, I was just calling it, when the COVID cards came around, the vax cards, and there's 4 spots on it and they're telling you get 2. I'm like, it's right there, guys. Like, there's going to be more. They're telling you it's on the back. There's blank spaces on the back, So,
yeah.
I was kind of calling it the whole time. But yeah, it's now to be 5 years removed from the beginning, it's crazy to be that far away from it, but still not have so many people be awake to all that stuff that has unraveled over and over. Like, even just Zuckerberg a few weeks ago on Joe Rogan, point blank saying to the world, yeah, we censored true information at that time, that information that really could have saved a lot of lives. And he's sitting there saying it, and you would expect an uprising of people say, "Oh my gosh, what has been done?" And it still hasn't happened. There's still our conversations, but the world hasn't caught up to it yet.
I know. Yeah, that really weirds me out too, because as much as like you said, there was so much that didn't make sense right away. I remember being told I had to wear a mask at the pool, like it's like not literally while I was swimming, although some people did see that in their states or whatever. I was in Canada in
Mhm.
Vancouver before I left, and I left before the mandates
Mhm.
came in. So not
Mhm.
only did I really have to deal with that so much, but I also got, I think, a really clear view into how crazy things were in certain places like Canada, because I went to Mexico and there was nothing happening here. There was nothing, nobody was
Mhm.
wearing masks, like nobody was talking about the vaccines. Everybody, it was just completely normal. We were all out and spitting in each other's faces. And you know what I mean? Like, and
Mhm.
then
Mhm.
my friends back in Vancouver were like obsessed with the vaccine. It was all they could think about and all they
Mhm.
could talk about. And they were acting like I was this terrible person for
Mhm.
operating as normal. And I was like, but everything's fine. Like, not,
Mhm.
there's everybody here.
Yeah.
Nobody's scared, and we're not all dead. And do you not see
Yeah.
that this is all bullshit, but they were
Right.
just angry.
Mhm.
And a lot of those same people, I think some of them have woken up since then, but a lot of those same people, I think, still buy the narrative and still
Mhm.
think that I'm a crazy person or a conspiracy
Mhm.
theorist. They still think that the Freedom Convoy were Nazis and white supremacists
Mhm.
and
Yeah.
violent and dangerous and yada yada
Mhm.
yada. And it's just, it feels like you're living in a whole different world. I mean,
Mhm.
do you think
Yeah.
it's all just, I mean, is this all cope or what is this?
Yeah, I think so. If you look at just the narrative that a lot of people were fed. Now, I will say, I think a lot of people have woken up, and I think once you do get to that side, you don't go back. So, the people that have, I've got people that have been close to me that have come around. That they're completely different person than who they were pre 2020, and then or during 2020, even very mask up, wiped all the way to wiping down your groceries and those sort of things, and now they're on the other sides sending me links that have you seen this? I'm like, yeah, I sent that to you 2 years ago, but I'm glad you're here. But but you have to realize, like, the general public was sold on this heroic narrative of, like, if you do this, you are the hero. They've been made the hero of this story, and they took that power and they ran with it. A lot of people ran with it to the degree of, you are the bad guy. I'm the hero and you are the bad guy. You're not only the bad guy, but you're evil. You're murdering people. You're dangerous. People that had known me my whole life were calling me dangerous all of a sudden. The things you're saying, Brad, are killing people. And so it really twisted their minds. And so, especially you look back to how many times they doubled down along the way of, like, no, 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 I'm the good guy. Every year that passed by since COVID. So now we're 5 years removed. We're never going to get some people back, right? They're so committed because they're 5 years deep into this. No, like, I did the good thing. And you can't look at yourself in the mirror if you can look back and go, oh my gosh, what did I do? I called my friends and family murderers. I called them the worst things you could call anybody imaginable. And for what? Nobody wants to come to terms with that. That's a very hard thing to come to terms with. So, I think that's where the reluctance comes in. It is just a huge mind twist where people have to realize the world that they're in is not what they thought it was. And if you already knew that kind of going into COVID, or you figured it out early on, then you're in a much better place mentally now. But and if you look at everything that has happened since COVID, the world has gotten out of control crazy. All of the little things that we forget about from day to day to day, that stuff is piled on top of COVID, which makes it even worse. So there's all this mental fog and stuff to sift through, to figure out what was true, what was real, and who you are as a person, and how did you handle it. But to me, yeah, it all goes back to, how did you handle COVID? Because that will tell you everything you need to know about who you are, and and the state of the world, how it works, the government, who are the bad guys, who are the good guys, who has integrity. It would reveal so much to really, if we could actually have that conversation sooner than 5 years down the road, and hopefully we don't leave it behind. It's one of the reasons I still talk about it, is because if you don't, it just floats away and everybody forgets about it.
And then we do it again.
And then we do it again. Right.
Yeah. I know, because I'm sure people respond to you in this way too. And people respond to me and are like, that was, blah, blah, blah years ago. Why are you still harping on about this? And it's because exactly as you say, I mean, it was really, really bad what happened, and we can never do that again. And people need to remember exactly how this went down. And were you one of the people who pressured or bullied or vilified or ostracized? I mean, I didn't know anything about this vaccine, and I was like, I knew enough to be like, I'm not scared of COVID. I'm not in danger. I'm not worried about getting a freaking cold. Like, I'm a healthy person. I'll be fine. And I also don't like being told what to do, and I don't want to do this mandate thing. I'm not just going to do it because the government tells me to, out of principle. Even if this vaccine maybe did work or did actually function as some version of a vaccine, I still, just on principle, I don't want to participate in that. And certainly I'm not going to bully other people. But a lot of people tried to bully and pressure me, and were like horrific to their neighbors, and their, people ostracized family members and refused to let them come over or, see their kids or whatever. And it was the way that people behaved was really kind of shocking and scary. And it's not obviously the first time something like that has happened in history, but you would hope that people would have learned from the times when people did do that and really, really, really bad things went down, but they don't. I mean, how does this make you feel about humanity?
It tells me that we're not capable of just ourselves. And like the AI conversation is at the forefront right now, and I'm like, guys, this isn't a good idea. I'm like, we're not going to do well with AI, guys. We got the internet, right? We got the internet 30 years ago in our houses, and the best we did with it was like,
porn addiction,
cat videos and porn. Like, like that's what we did with it. We all have this thing in our hand, and we're not smarter for it, right? That's the point, is like, we have all of humanity wrapped up in this thing. And the history of humanity is in our pocket. Can look up anything at any moment, and nobody's smarter for it. Everybody's actually dumber. I think that's the general consensus, is like, we're all kind of dumber now. So it didn't really do its job. And so moving into the AI world, or just watching how COVID was handled, it's like, we're not doing too hot. We've got to reassess how we're doing things, and how we're and get serious about who we are as people, because we're just down a crazy path. The fact that in the past 5 years, what is a woman has become part of the public conversation, and the definition of a man and woman, these basic foundational pieces of our society that help us understand who we are have been ripped to shreds, and we're just trying to hang on to even the basics now. So we're not in a good point right now, but I do think that, a silver lining that did come out of the last couple of years was that a lot of us found each other. I had certainly a naive and optimistic outlook on humanity pre-2020. I think that's what 2020 did to me, was it ripped it to shreds, because I had this idea that there was a baseline understanding of who we are, of what good and bad was, or what you believed in. And, that, like I was saying earlier, generally you don't want to believe in politicians or what you see on the, on the news, on TV, because it all gets, uh, fluffed up and lied about, and big pharma is corrupted. Like, these are general things I assumed a lot of people knew. And then throughout 2020, I'm just sitting there going, wait, a lot of people are falling for this, like, really fast, and they're committing to it. And especially when you see it in close relationships and friendships and family, where you really see the damage is done. It's disappointing and it's heartbreaking, but new relationships were made out of that time. I've made friends with a lot of musicians that that did speak up, that took the chance to say something with their art, because I lost a lot of friends in entertainment, and they, who instantly just shut the door on me. But then, little by little, those of us that did speak out started finding each other, and then we're creating new art together, and we have this relationship that we wouldn't have had in the old world, and that happened across the board, where all of a sudden I'm friends with so many doctors and so many teachers who spoke out, and we're all on this playing the same level that I thought the world was at. So we found each other, right? And that's a silver lining, I think, where I think it's gotten so crazy to the point now where people are kind of like, even if you're on the outside of certain rabbit holes, or however you want to describe it, if you wake up every day and you go to work and you don't try not to think about things too seriously, you're just trying to pay the bills, feed your kids, maybe you watch the news a little bit every night or something. If you're just the average person, I think even the average person, something in them knows, like, where we're at right now is off, and there's too much happening in the world to ignore it at this point, even if you are just an average person. So we'll see where we go, from here. But it's kind of like getting, a lot has been stripped away over the last 5 years specifically. So, my realization was a few years into it. I was like, oh, the damage that's done is damage that we're going to have to repair for the rest of our life. We have certain things have happened over the last 5 years that are going to affect the next generation and the generation after that. And that's just the way it is. It's going to be an ongoing thing to repair. And I feel like my responsibility as a father, and, for my kids and for my future grandkids down the road, is to do my best to speak out on what's bad and try to put the good in there and fight for what's right and true.
Yeah, I mean, speaking out about controversial things is really difficult, to say the least, but I think that there's a bunch of things that it accomplishes, and on a personal level, I think it just makes you braver yourself. It makes you less worried about saying controversial things and more comfortable speaking the truth, and I think also more comfortable kind of letting go of, or being unaffected by, those who will come after you or bail on you or vilify you because you spoke the truth or said things that you weren't supposed to say while they were towing the line. It also, it's a gift to other people because it makes other people brave. That's one of the most important reasons why people should speak out about these things, is because it encourages and emboldens others. And of course, the more of us are, the easier it becomes. But how did this impact your music career in particular?
It changed everything for me, from, how I approach music, how I record it, what I'm writing about, and who I'm connecting with, and who I'm making the music. It changed everything from the ground up. It was kind of like starting over. In fact, like a lot of those songs, when I started 5 Times August, I was 18. So a lot of my earliest memories at the beginning were recording in my bedroom, in my home, and a lot of this, my first album was recorded with, one or two microphones or something, and it's just recorded at home, and that's exactly what all these protests songs were. They were me recording at home again and reconnecting with just this rawness and this um, yearning to say something, and so it was like it was like taking 20 years of my career and experience and just slamming it right back to zero, but with all this experience, that I had, and thrusting it forward in a new way. But yeah, it changed a lot. But as far as like relationships go, like the people was the most important thing. The people that were connecting with it. It was a reciprocal relationship, because by them hearing what I had to say through my music and listening to it and appreciating it and using it as a tool for them to say things, it was encouraging to me. And so it's kind of like we were letting each other know, like, okay, I'm here for you and you're here for me. And it allowed me to lean more into it from one song to the next, because when I released that first song, it was a very lonely place to sit for a little while, to feel like you just screwed everything that you had worked for your whole career. I had 20 years of a music career behind me, and all these fans, and all of a sudden this worry about what they might think if I say this was just more and more easily getting shoved to the side. Like, I don't care, I don't care what they say. What I care about is these people over here. And that's a, a way that I found myself. Who are you really? Like I was saying earlier, COVID brought out who you really are, I think, as a person. And I kept finding myself getting stronger and stronger in this sense of just I don't have to care what people think anymore, which I was very, aware of in my old life, because you're in this huge industry where opportunities are at your disposal and you can work with that person, and maybe this person believes in that and you don't, but you better keep your mouth shut about it, because you don't want to upset them. You might lose a gig or an opportunity or whatever it may be. And little by little, that whole idea of what making it is, just starts to fall to pieces, and this new idea of making it comes to surface, which is a really beautiful thing, because it's built with integrity and standing your ground and what you think is right and true. And I'll be able to say that, and so will the other musicians that stood up during that time. They'll always be able to say that, what, during that time, I put myself at the forefront of it and I said what I needed to say, and I have no regrets about it. I know that, my buddy Pete Parade was in the band The Offspring, and they're a huge band, and they let him go over the shots, and he has no regrets over it, and he's in a new band now, and it's kind of a super group of guys that got kicked out of their bands for not getting the shot. But all that to say, it's just, new things came out of it, and no regrets at all.
I mean, musicians were always the rebels in the past. Maybe artists in general, but I think musicians in particular. And that all changed, it seems like, in the past 5 years. I mean, it may well have started before that, but it became very obvious in the past 5 years.
Mm-hmm.
People like Neil
Mm-hmm.
Young and Joni Mitchell and Rage Against the
Mm-hmm.
Machine started
Right.
really, you know,
Mm-hmm.
becoming the machine in a lot of
Yeah.
ways. And I mean, it's so gross to watch. Like, it's like, how are you supposed to have respect for any of these like pathetic people? Sorry,
Yeah.
but it's just,
Yeah.
I like, how did they get so lost? Do you think that it's just celebrity and you completely lose touch with the real world, or has something changed about the music industry?
I mean, it's showbiz at the end of the day, and that's what people have to realize. A lot of a lot of my heroes. I put out a song a couple of years ago called "Ain't No Rock and Roll," calling out all of these people that I used to admire, and it was kind of a tough video to make when I'm sitting there putting these my heroes in this video, calling them out. But yeah, you have these slivers of what the industry actually is to analyze now. Like when you say Neil Young, you know, who's supposed to be, a protest, rebellious rock and roller, who, what did he do throughout COVID? Well, he drew a line in the sand with Spotify, and he says, you can't have Joe Rogan spouting this misinformation, so it's either me or Joe Rogan. And he draws this ridiculous line in the sand, and he loses that battle. Okay, nobody cares. Neil Young he takes his stuff off of Spotify, right? And then Joe Rogan stays. He grows bigger than ever. And then a year later, what happens? This is the kicker of the whole story. Is a year later, Joe Rogan's contract gets renewed in even bigger way. He's now on YouTube and Apple and Amazon. His show is growing. So the question that I ask is, what are you going to do, Neil Young? Are you going to take your music down from YouTube and Amazon and these other platforms that Joe Rogan is spouting off this dangerous misinformation on? And of course he doesn't. And that tells you where his true, convictions lie, right? Like he made this statement like, hey guys, I'm trying to appease these, the government's narrative by, making this quasi rock and roll statement, but it backfires on him. And then his true colors are shown later, whereas just like I said, Joe Rogan reaches more people, but Neil Young's not going to take his music down from over there and over there because he doesn't actually believe it. And we saw that across the board with, Rage Against the Machine, all these artists that required vaccinations to go to their concerts, who were segregating audiences, their fans by their vax status, which was really heartbreaking because that's where we're supposed to go and unite despite our differences, is in the concert hall, right, at these venues. And so it just revealed a lot, and then it makes you go, how much of that is really real? How much of these guys really actually meant what they were saying all these decades? Some of these guys, and I have to say, I don't think any of them really believed it, because to me, growing up watching all these guys, everything I know about rock and roll is from watching these guys and what that attitude is supposed to represent. I wouldn't call myself a rock and roller. I'm just a dad who writes songs. I always sat on the outskirts of the music industry going, that'll never really be me. I'm not enough of a badass to be a rock and roller. But it turns out I had more of that spirit in me than most of them, just based on, if there was any time to stand up against the man, it was the last 4 to 5 years. And, almost nobody showed up. Eric Clapton, Van Morrison, out of, the entire mainstream industry, very few. You could count them on one or two hands at most. And then it was a bunch of indie guys like me. And, I'm not attached to any record label, and I haven't been. I've always been independent. So I've been, free to say what I would want to say at any moment. And I felt like this was the moment to say something.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting because it's, on one hand, you're like, okay, the people with the most power and the most financial security, the most money, the most celebrity, people who you would think would be in a position to speak out and, you know, first of all, have more impact, but also lose less than independents. I mean, I felt like this throughout the gender identity debate because I've been in that fight since like 2012, and I've suffered and been punished for doing so over and
Mhm.
over and over and over and over again in a million different ways. And
Mhm.
so I've always been really frustrated because I'm like, I don't have anything. Like, I don't have any money. Like, I was always
Mhm.
independent. I was working as an independent journalist. I've always just done my podcast on my own. I've always been an independent writer. So, on one hand, yeah, you have more freedom to speak out because you don't have a boss and you don't have advertisers who are going to pull out. Like, you have less to lose. But I
Mhm.
mean, it was almost impossible for me to get anywhere with what I was saying because it was just me. And there were all these
Right.
people who had these huge platforms who could have done
Mhm.
something and didn't because they didn't want to lose what they had, which was, again, so much
Right.
more than what I had. And we saw the same thing happen through COVID. And it's just, it's so weird that it's the people with the least who
Mhm.
usually are the ones who take the biggest risks, and the people with all the power and the privilege who aren't marginalized in any way. And, you know, whatever. So
Mhm.
you get canceled, you have your mansion, you have all your money, you're
Mhm.
not going to be financially screwed. Like, why won't you say something?
Mhm. Yeah, I don't know. I think that they're all within inside of a certain system. You know, once you reach a certain tier of celebrity, you're in the club. And so you're going to do whatever is funneling through your management's, memos coming through of what it needs to, what the trends are, right? And so that's why you see every celebrity, or what we saw was, inside of a couple weeks, every celebrity was out there getting their shot, saying, "Hey, look what I did." That wasn't organic. That was completely a campaign behind the scenes, and people up to, anywhere from down the average, low tier Instagram influencer, all the way up to Mariah Carey. There was systems in place to get as many of anybody who had any kind of platform to say something at that time. Um, and it was all in the name of health, right? You're going to be a hero. We've got to come together. It's a very uniting message, right? And just like we saw with uh, vaccinated only concerts and things like that, it's all in the name of health. But then again, a few years removed from that, that's where you really see their true colors, because they pushed this thing not just on the public, but on their fans. And they have no, and it was all in the name of health. We really care about our fans. We want to get back out on the road. We're going to have vaccine clinics at our shows. Um, Very positive, for people to hear that are unassuming and trust these figures. And then a few years later, more and more comes out. And are these characters, are these figures looking back now and going, "Oh, geez, I wonder how many of my fans got injured by that thing." Oh, geez, what did I push on the public? Like, nobody's doing that. And that's where I think, that their true character really comes to surface, because nobody is taking accountability for this. If they do, they'll they do it in a way where they don't have to look at themselves. I've seen it with a
Mm.
few figures. There's guys like Pierce Morgan who have pivoted what they've said, who said terrible things all throughout COVID about the unvaccinated and who they were. And then all of a sudden he changes his tune and he's Mr. Skeptical guy. And when you say, "Hey, are you going to apologize for these things?" Like, I asked him on when it was Twitter, and he blocked me over it. And so, that's my first question now when somebody comes around, is like, I'm like, "Well, where have you been? It's been 4 or 5 years. Where have you been? What's your motive now?" And I think, like, now that we've got a new administration coming in, there's a lot of things that are safer to say now, and we're going to see an influx of that in the next year. We've already seen it. All of a sudden, there were certain celebrities that were at the inauguration where I'm like, where have these people been? Like that's my number one question. And so I don't know. It's just, to me, it's all showbiz, and I think it just, again, it revealed a lot about what it is that we're saying. I think a lot of people have caught on. People are tired of celebrity opinions. We're seeing it today with Selena Gomez crying her heart out
Crying
over the
on the internet over the image of children being
yeah,
deported. I was like, are you on glue? Like, nobody
yeah,
buys this anymore. Like, this is
yeah.
so,
Mhm.
I mean, anybody crying with to their phones, I'm gonna be
I,
like, this is
I
not
know. Can you,
authentic.
can,
Like,
I know. Can you
you feel that
imagine?
emotional and you get out your phone.
Excuse me. Like taking the time to, like, I think I just posted that right
It's
before we
so
got on this
crazy.
on together, but I was like, there would never be any moment in my life where I'm crying in any meaningful way and my brain goes, I've got to record this and put it on the internet for others to see. Like, no. And again, that's the thing, is these people are detached from reality. And so that's Hollywood. It's all showbiz. It's, even if she, one of two things. Her manager said, you got to get on your TikTok or your Instagram and cry. Or she's just so detached from what the situation is because of her lifestyle and where she lives and her financial bracket, that she really thinks all the things that are in her echo chamber. And she's like, oh my God, there's sending kids out now. And, like, what are you doing? And the average person has caught on to this, and we're tired of hearing about it because we're just like, you don't know, you're dumb. Like, you win an award every year and you go on stage and you make a statement about, your political beliefs, and we're all sitting there looking at each other like, no, we don't want to hear it anymore. So that's something I look forward to with the next phase of entertainment. Is I think I think that's another silver lining that's come out of the COVID era. It's just this new sort of path of who it is that's creating the art and culture. I think the average person is kind of catching on to letting go of old Hollywood, just because just because we grew up with them, just because we like that one movie or that one song, we tend to look past a lot of shady things. We all
Yeah.
know what happens in Hollywood. We all have seen what happens to child actors when they grow up and how messed up they are. We know there's something terrible going on, but we look past it because they were in that movie I liked and it's kind of like it's getting to that point now between Epstein and Weinstein and Diddy and all these figures are coming up where that's where I think it's getting so big, like I mentioned earlier, that the average person is like, they can't help but notice something's off at this point. So,
Yeah, I mean, at this point, it's like, how can you respect or idolize these people who have been involved in such disgusting things this whole time? And, just felt, I guess, just felt so entitled because they had such power and celebrity that they were never going to get caught and they were never going to be outed. And when people did try to out them, they were offed in some cases or just
mm-hmm,
blacklisted from Hollywood. But I mean,
mm-hmm,
yeah,
mm-hmm,
I think everything has changed when it comes to celebrity and the media, which I think is a really good thing.
mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
So, and sorry, you go ahead. Were you going to say
No,
something?
go ahead. No,
I
go
I
ahead.
saw you and also Chrissy Marr talking
Mm.
about Whitney Cummings on X because
Oh
she
yeah.
and I
Mm-hmm.
listened to your podcast conversation with her also where you
Okay.
guys were talking about that as
Mm-hmm.
well. And so she I think is probably one of these celebrities that you're referencing who really went along with the vaccine mandates and pushed the COVID narratives in a lot of
Mm-hmm.
ways, and then went on CNN on New Year's Eve and made all these, I guess, what are referred to as kind of like based or red pilled
Mm-hmm.
jokes.
Mm-hmm.
And you called her out, and Chrissy called her out, and most people loved what she did and applauded it. And I'm kind of with you where again, I've experienced something similar with the gender identity thing where I'm like, oh, now you're brave? Like now
Mhm.
when it's not brave anymore?
Mhm.
Like now
Mhm.
you could have said something when I said something and maybe we could have stopped this from happening in the first
Yeah.
place, but you didn't.
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
and now that it's like the cool thing to do and we're all done with woke and we're saying all the things that we weren't allowed to say 3 years ago,
Mhm.
now you're making this your platform? Like get out of
Yeah.
here.
Mhm. Yeah, I'm very defensive towards, those my friends that have stood up, because I know their stories. I know what they risked, and we all kind of went through this thing together. So when somebody surfaces out of nowhere, there's all of a sudden saying all these like I said, based things where, like, well, we've all been saying that, but you just happen to say it on CNN right at midnight with a minute to spare, and somebody like that gets blown up, and that's kind of the problem with, I think, you know however you want to define it, the conservative or the right or independent, sort of everybody who's not woke or on
Mm-hmm.
that side of the spectrum is pining for heroes, and they love to take somebody who used to be on one side, and if they say the right thing, then they gobble it up and they go, look, this person who's on the who was against us is now with us, and they get very excited about that and build them up very quickly. And I get
Yeah.
very tired of seeing that, because there's plenty of us that have been here the whole time, and you know I whether it's not just me, it's friends who are comedians, friends who are actors, who took the chance to say something when it really really mattered, and they've been overlooked, this whole time, and then somebody else comes along and just gets pushed up to, put up on this pedestal. I'm like, do you not, like, take 5 minutes before you get excited and go look at their history, see where they're at. The receipts are all there. Go see the breadcrumbs of where they were. And in Whitney Cummings' case, it was like, I feel like she was, part of the problem a little bit ago. And so, sure enough, she was, pushing the shots, had, mandated shots. The reason I called her out was because she was sitting there responding to people on X, and she was saying it wasn't my thing. It was the venue's thing. She was putting the blame on the venue, and I'm like, you're making the venue money. It wasn't the venue. It was you. You
Mm-hmm.
had the decision to make of, do I tell the venue no, we're not doing that, or do I comply? And based on her posts from that time, she had no problem with the venue's requirements for those shows. So I was calling her out on it, and she ended up blocking me as well. And those are huge red flags to me. I see it time and time again. Like I said, like, my first question is, where have you been? Where were you? And if they block you, well, then there it's an insincere apology. Because I'm all for, people changing their mind. Like, I get flack for it on X because I call people out all the time, and people go, how are we supposed to win anybody over if you're calling them out whenever they change
Yeah.
their mind? I'm like, I don't think they changed their mind. I think they're trying to save face. They're trying to
Yeah.
cover their own ass, but they're not sincere about it. I compare it to an abusive relationship. Like, we've been in an abusive relationship with a lot of people for a number of years now, and you don't an abusive person doesn't say, hey, I'm not going to do it anymore, and then you forgive them. Like, that's not how it works. Trust has been broken, and so for a lot
Mm-hmm.
of these figures, to me, I go, you have a lot of work to do, to rebuild that trust if you really mean it. So prove it. But you know, maybe that's foolish of me, because Chrissy and I were joking that we could have just, gone along and complied the whole time, and came out on the other side and just said the right thing for 60 seconds and been cheered for it. So who knows? Maybe we're the foolish ones risking our career and stuff.
I don't think so. I think that some people have integrity and some people don't. And that means a lot. Maybe not financially, but in terms of your soul health, perhaps. Um,
Hmm.
yeah, I just I mean, I don't know if you followed these guys either, but like Anna Kasparian and Cenk Yu are people that I've just been like so grossed out over. I've never been huge fans of them because I think that they're gross. But
Hmm.
all of a sudden, they've switched to the other side. And, there's a whole bunch of people who are now all of a sudden critical of the
Yeah.
Democrats and the left and cancel culture. And I'm like, bro, like too late. We already had these conversations. And
Yeah.
I've changed my mind about all sorts of things. Like I've been wrong about
Sure.
so many things.
Yeah.
I was a socialist for most of my life. And like,
Hmm.
I cried when Hillary Clinton lost the election in 2016.
Hmm.
But I said, you know, I was wrong and I didn't get it. And,
Hmm.
once I started figuring it out, I started talking about it and I did my best, I think, to
Hmm.
be accountable for buying into all that stuff. And I think I
Yeah.
also like I'm not really regretful of that stuff because I feel like I understand the left and that ideology a
Hmm.
lot better than maybe people who've been conservative or on the right for their whole lives have because I was that person. And I did
Hmm.
think that people who didn't think like me were just dumb or greedy
Hmm.
or bad, essentially. And I learned a lot by really just talking to different kinds of people and listening to different kinds of media and
Hmm.
trying to understand people who were different than me because I thought, okay, I must be missing something. I
Yeah.
probably am missing something. Like I do want to understand people who are anti-abortion or whatever because I don't believe, that they're all just evil and crazy. And even if I come out the other end not agreeing,
Hmm.
I can see them as human beings and try to understand their positions at very least. And often you will understand something that changed your mind. But
Hmm.
um
Hmm.
yeah, I don't think I'm ever I don't think I'm ever gonna forgive the people who said nothing when it was inconvenient to
Hmm.
say it and then just as soon as it was convenient and the political tides
Yeah.
turned, then they turned along with them. And I'm really surprised at how many people just seem to forget and be like, oh, this is great. And say, what you just said earlier, which is like, well, we just need people on our side. I'm like, no, I don't want people. What's my
Hmm.
side? My side isn't liars or
Yeah.
grifters or people who
Right.
have no integrity and people who don't tell the truth because they're worried about how it'll impact their career or their social circles. I mean, a lot of people pretend this is about money and jobs, but I think that a lot more of it is just about, social status. They don't want to lose their
Hmm.
status and not be invited to the parties and lose their friends. And it's like,
Hmm.
well, this is how it goes, like telling the
Yeah.
truth is a risk.
Right. Right.
If it weren't a risk, then
Yeah.
it wouldn't really matter that much.
Hmm. Yeah, I think that there's different tiers of things. To me, the people I'm going to hold accountable the most are people who had huge platforms. The people that you know should have been a lot more responsible with their reach and who they were talking to. I think
Right.
if you were on TV, on the news every night, you had a talk show. If you had if you're a pop star, a major actor, and you took part in that campaign, I'm going to be hard on you. The average person, our one-on-one relationships, I think those are, you know, nuanced little things that everybody's got to take, one relationship at a time because those are on a smaller scale than what um, mainstream culture was pushing at the time. And that's the way it should have been the whole time. It should have been, but what did they do? They separated those smaller relationships, and they told us to stay home, and they gave us only what was on the TV, and that programmed whoever was watching the TV at the time to only listen to what they were seeing and not think objectively about what was happening outside of their walls because they were staying inside. So there's a lot of layers to it, but it's not that I'm not a forgiving person. Um, But if you're going to come at me, we're going to have, and pretend like it didn't happen. We're going to have the conversation. But on a public scale, being from the entertainment field, I feel like I have a responsibility on my part to call out, some of these people with my own platform, because it's a way to sort of fight back. Because if me or some of my other friends in the industry hadn't, then nobody would have been there at all. And so, at this point, um, it's just a matter of, I don't want to let our guard down, just because things, are hopefully going to get better with the next administration. I don't know. I don't trust anybody anymore. It's not like I'm just going to be like, okay, that whole time, the whole COVID era is still being left over there. A few things have been, addressed, but not really that much. And a national conversation, a world conversation about that time has not happened yet. And a lot has yet to be revealed. So, and I just feel like we can't distance ourselves too far from it before it gets lost to time. I refuse to accept that humanity can collectively sit through that time frame and just let it waft away in the wind and we just forget about it. I have a hard time accepting that, because that was the moment in our lifetime that really defined, who we were and where we were going, and what just where we were at collectively. I think it really did define humanity and what we're capable of. We say no, never forget and never again, all, for 80 years. And then, COVID rolls around and very quickly we threw that out the window. So.
Well, and I mean, it was a massive scam that hurt millions and millions of people and made a few people very rich. And now Fauci's been pardoned and is never going to be held accountable for what he did.
Yeah, that too. I mean, there's another admission of guilt, all these things that are just like, they're right there, people. Like, are you not upset about this in any degree? You just want to let it go? Like, you've been lied to. You were bamboozled. Zuckerberg's telling you he withheld life-saving information. Yes, he interfered with the election. Yes, he censored important doctors that in vaccine injury groups. And Fauci's been pardoned from what? Why aren't you asking what, like these important questions? But we've just been so, numbed out to it all, because tomorrow's another day and another thing's going to pop up that we're all going to talk about, like Selena Gomez crying about the border. And then we're going to forget about Fauci for 48 hours. And then, like, it's such a mess that we can't even focus anymore, because we're looking at all of the world's problems at one time. I don't want to let COVID slip through the cracks. And I know that we have a lot of really good, people that are fighting the good fight, that are at the forefront of it, that are big voices that aren't going to let it go. I hope we get there sooner than later.
Did you personally experience internet censorship?
Yeah, that was a big awakening to me, was hearing about censorship and then watching it happen to myself. So I had a number of music videos that got flagged on YouTube, several that got taken down. I think most of the protest songs they won't let me advertise on, which is funny, because like my video, I've got a number of videos that I've been flagged as medical misinformation. And that was a really eye-opening thing to me, because I'm like, this is art. This is a music video. This is a song. And you're interpreting this art now for people. That's a whole dystopian thing that I had not considered happening. Like, you can censor a doctor or a nurse, somebody, and say, well, that's not true. But once you cross it into the field of entertainment and art, it's a whole other, it's a whole other thing. So, I mean, YouTube, Wikipedia took my page down, and that had been up for a long
Oh, they just
time.
took
And
it
all of a sudden,
down.
they just took it down. Somebody wrote me and was like, your page is flagged to be taken down. And I was like, really? It's like, it's been up there forever. And I went in to look at it, and they said, I can't remember what the notification was. It was like I wasn't, all of a sudden I wasn't relevant enough to be on Wikipedia. It was like, this artist is not relevant. And I'm like, it's,
You've
am I
lost your
taking
public
up
figure
prime?
status or
Yeah,
something like
like,
that.
I'm not I'm just relevant enough for you to take notice and want to take down my page, but like, it didn't make sense. But that happened right after I put my song out about Fauci, so I knew it had to be connected, because that song got me into a lot of trouble. That was my song "Sad Little Man" put me in another tier of censorship, where it was kind of like, I think I was kind of low key putting out these songs, but then I put out this song calling out, the science, the god of science at that time. Nobody was really calling Fauci out. And I put this video out, and then, yeah, YouTube was flagging my stuff. Wikipedia took my page down. Facebook was starting to flag my posts more. And so all of a sudden I was seeing this stuff happen to me that, I had only heard about. And I was hoping that what that would do would wake people up that had been following me, that maybe were, going like, oh, Brad's being crazy. But then they go, oh, wow, he's actually being censored. There must be something to that. I was kind of hoping that maybe, people that might have been disagreeing with me at the time might at least perk up their head to going like, oh, really? Like, they're censoring his music videos? That doesn't seem right. But I think to those people's minds, it was kind of like, at that point, it was like, oh, good, we can't have that misinformation out there. So
He's killing people with his music
I,
videos.
I was killing people. It's no big deal.
And so what do you think about this, like, Zuckerberg going on Rogan and talking about how he was forced to censor by the government, and the fact that he was, applauded for, I guess, coming back around to free speech?
Yeah, see, that was another situation where, like, I immediately jumped on it, because I was like, again, he's like telling you right there, he committed crimes against humanity, like right there. Yes, I did these things. And then, but he, of course, he doesn't apologize for it. That's my issue with these moments, is this person saying this stuff. Yeah, it happened, but they don't apologize. They don't take accountability for it. Why would they? That's a dangerous thing to take accountability for. So he pivots and he says, oh, government pressure, it was brutal. And he makes himself out to be a victim in this moment. And to me, I was more actually upset by Joe Rogan, who didn't press on that moment, because that was the moment to say, whoa, 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 whoa. Wait a minute. What are you saying right now? And really hammer in, that moment home. But it didn't. And, I think a lot of people have caught on, Zuckerberg's sort of becoming this, Bill Gates type figure, where I think most people are kind of like, they don't trust him very much. And he's trying to rebrand himself right now as the good guy. And again, it's insincere, and he's trying to cover his own ass. And until he reaches a moment where he, says, look, I shouldn't have done that. I apologize. I don't know how many lives I ruined, but I'm going to create an organization to help, those who were injured by the COVID shot. Like, those kind of actions are what I'm looking for, I think, at the end of the day. If you're not going to say, I'm sorry, if you're not going to say, I'm never going to let this happen again, put some action into it, especially if you're on that high tier of, Zuckerberg financial status. Like, make an organization to help these people. I did a campaign back in April of 2023 where I donated 100% of my digital album sales of the month to the vaccine injured. And, I raised a bit, but it was kind of like, why do I have to do this? Like, is anybody else going to step in to make these moves? There's plenty of other people who can make a bigger impact than me, but nobody else was doing it. So I just felt like I had to pick up the slack to do it. But that's what I would like to see. Zuckerberg, if he wants to earn the trust of the people back, you know, if he's going to say, I'm going to reverse this, I'm going to make it better, you can't make that situation better. You can only, go back and try to rebuild what you burned down, and in the best, however you can do that, help out families who are injured, people that have took the shot and had to relearn to walk, and they've got medical bills piled on because the people that trusted the government, that took this shot, that were promised it was safe and effective, those people have been abandoned by every single person that convinced them this was an okay thing to do. And so a lot of my fight the last couple of years, because I've met a lot of those people, those that have been vaccine injured, and I know them, and because of my own son, in his history with shots, those are the people that I try to fight for, that I try to help and give a voice to with my platform, and I'd like to see more people do that.
Thanks so much for taking the time to talk with me. I really appreciate it, and I really appreciate all that you've done, and I really appreciate your tweets. And can you tell us? I do. I think they're great. I can you tell us what you're working on right now and how people can find your music?
Yeah, so you can check out fivetimesaugust.com is my website, and we've got CDs and records for sale there, and that's the best way to support the music. Right now, I am working on a number of projects. One of them is actually for a movie, for a kids show, TV show that I've been working on the last few years called Star Spangled Adventures, which is a homeschool curriculum series that's funded by one of Ben Carson's organizations. And I've been writing the music for that show for, I guess, a couple of years now. And we're actually going to be doing a movie, and I'm going to be working on that. So that'll be a lot of fun. It's kind of like my political and kid world kind of crossed paths over the last couple of years, and found a project to work on. So I'll be doing that, and I'll be speaking out more, through my music, and just doing what I do, getting on posting the tweets and making music.
Awesome. Okay, that sounds cool. I'm glad to hear it. Thanks again for your time, and yeah, good luck with everything. I'll be following along for sure.
Thanks so much.
Okay, take care. Bye bye.